Hello and welcome to a brand new podcast from me, Santosh Sirur, Navigating Life with Human Compass. One of the paradoxes of our lifetime is that while technology has helped bridge the distance between two cities and even made communication from space possible, but the same technology has resulted in many instances where two individuals living across the street or working across two desks on the same floor struggle to talk to each other. This is just one instance, but there are several such instances where we start to realize that human connect is coming down, and therefore, in times of difficulty or while navigating challenges of life, we often don't know where to go and who to reach out to. It's time for us to be compass to ourselves as well as be a human compass to others. It's time to create content that not only brings minds and hearts together, but also provide a network for sharing ideas and thoughts from some of the brilliant minds in coaching and mentoring industry which can act as a beacon of light when needed. This podcast is inspired by the upcoming EduTech Human Compass that intends to focus on helping particularly young adults with basic life skills of goal and vision setting, rewiring habits, overpowering procrastination, developing personal resiliency, and ensuring emotion. The word human compass resonates so well with the intention of this podcast that we thought it would be most appropriate to bring one of the two founders of this initiative onto our show. So let me introduce and welcome Chetan Bulsari, co-founder of Human Compass. Hi, Chetan, and welcome to this new podcast.
Hi, Santosh.
Chetan, the first question I have for you is 2 decades of corporate life, a leadership role. What drove you to coaching?
Coaching for me has always been a passion. It's just that it was waiting for it to kind of burst out. Right from my initial days, if I remember, whether it was school or college, my friends used to reach out to me for their technical difficulties. When I kind of entered into the corporate space, it started becoming a little bit more formal. And then as I rose through the leadership rank, kind of had the opportunity to mentor and work with a lot of individuals. It started to become more formal when I started joining the college campus interviews and talking at their symposiums, panel discussions, and guest lectures. If I remember, I think the first one I would have done would have been in 2009 with I Am Lucknow. And that was my first big breakthrough in terms of going on to a reputed institution and actually conducting a guest lecture. In the last few years, I think that energy within me was just waiting to burst out. And at the right opportunity, I felt this is the time to transition. So yeah, here I am.
Okay. Actually, Chetan, this brings to me a very interesting observation. I've seen many individuals who in this age group of 35 to 50 have already or are kind of contemplating the shift from their corporate role to pursue, their own interests, right? From your perspective, Chetan, do you see any underlying shift in how people are actually looking at life post-COVID? Is this a big trend that you see post-COVID especially?
So, Santosh, I think you're right in many ways because yes, there is a shift, and within my own circle of friends, there are a lot of people who've already done the transition or are kind of in the thought process. I would say COVID did play a role where people started to kind of reflect back on what they've been doing, what their life purpose is, etc. But I see a bigger socioeconomic shift here. And if you give me a couple of minutes, I'll probably go a little bit deeper because I did research on that subject as part of my graduation to be a life coach. For most of us, this would hold true where our parents came from a generation where the basic roti kapda makan needs or the food, clothing, shelter was a primary. It's not that they all struggled, but that was probably something that they made it as the purpose of their life. And for many of our parents, the housing or the house came at the end of their career, largely funded from their pension and gratuity. Now, we grew up, people I'm talking about in the age group of 35 to 50, grew up seeing that struggle to ensure that there is security and stability. So we kind of imbibe those values into us. But with everything that's happening in the economy, the economic growth, the increase in the opportunities, etc., the objectives that we set for ourselves of Roti Kapda Makan, firstly was already on the base of what they had achieved. And then we achieved it much faster. And for most people, their first house came when they were in their 20s or 30s. And we ended up breaking a lot of glass ceiling, right? from say a two-wheeler to a four-wheeler, from one-bedroom apartment to a three-bedroom apartment. Instead of doing domestic travels, we started going abroad, from government schools, public schools to international schools. So I would probably say the list can go on, but you get the point that we ended up becoming a glass breaking generation.
True.
Now, as a result, we get to a point where you ask yourself that, the expectations that the society set from us to say, get educated, get qualified, get married, have kids, have a house, have a car, kind of got achieved very much halfway through a mark. And then the question is, society doesn't have any further expectations. So you ponder as to what is the next for yourself. Either you start the whole cycle all over again with your kids.
So, how does this next generation actually take it forward, Chetan? Because, very interesting thing, right, Chetan, before, you even tell us, this is very interesting talk amongst our generation, right, the 35 to 50 bracket. We are also called the sandwich generation. We had to listen to our parents, and now we have to listen to our kids. So we are the sandwich generation. Maybe from there you can take it forward. What exactly happens with this generation going forward?
Okay, so the way I'm seeing, especially now that, for kids who are in the age group anywhere between, say, 12, 15 to about 25, it's already starting to show up of how that next generation will respond. So a lot of these kids who are in age group of 25 and less have been raised in a very stable, secure, and a safe environment. So all that they have seen is a safety. All that they have seen is a stability. So in some way, as it says, the grass is always greener side, this generation is growing up with an increasing sense of wanting to experience new things, take risks. Now, taking risks is obviously the other way to kind of say that they are actually urging to experience what uncertainty is. So for them, the risk taking shows up in the way they actually make choices about their careers, right? Choices they make about their life partners, or the risk that they're willing to take about their travel plans or their cuisines, etc., go to offbeat locations. So you can clearly see a trend where the kids who are 25 and below, or young adults who are 25 and below, are starting to bring out that urge to experience uncertainty and risk in a very different way. And which is why you see a lot of young adults actually doing very well in their own entrepreneurial setup at a very early age, and then actually exiting it out to do something different. So I definitely see a huge shift from that perspective. And I think that's probably where there's a three generational perspectives playing out, which often leads to a generation gap. But you've got the individuals who are 60, 65 plus, who've been raised and lived life with a very secure, stable perspective as their mind. The middle generation, which is probably where we would put ourselves, would be in the middle, where we are the transition generation from stability to probably venturing it out much later in the life. And then our next generation is probably doing that very much at the start of their career or their professional lives.
Okay, but is that typically a very, it's definitely a very insightful and, you really explained it well. But is this very urban city centric, or do you think this is also kind of slowly moving into, rural and tier 2 and 3 as well?
So my assessment is that this would hold true in almost every pattern. But what could appear different is the timing of it, right? Because depending on which part of the country or the world you are, whether it's an urban or rural, some of these cycles could be running slightly differently. Also, what could happen is that you could see a jump in terms of the actual journey. Like, for example, if you draw a parallel, a lot of us would have gone through from a manual record keeping to a desktop to a laptop to now a smartphone, right? Whereas if you look at the current generation, they've skipped everything and for pretty much doing everything off their smartphones, right? Yeah. Which we would have progressed over it. So this generation has skipped it entirely. Now, if you take that parallel and draw between urban and rural, again, they're the same thing. Now with computerization, digitization kind of making its way into the rural areas as well, they need not go through this entire journey from desktop all the way to a smartphone. They are pretty much there on the smartphone. So this would play out, just that it would play out slightly differently between various regions and how you are in that cycle.
Absolutely. And in fact, it reminds me of, this whole thing, right? When kids ask us, hey, how could you even survive without a Netflix, right? Or, how do I tell them? How do we tell them, when we were kids, it used to take 12, 15 plus years to even get a basic telephone instrument in our place. And now you have a smartphone which just gets activated in just 5 minutes flat, right? So very insightful explanation, Chetan. While there was always that generational gap, right, and ideology differences between these two generations, But this evolution does seem to explain why the gap seems to be widening, right? Now, like staying on this topic, can you actually talk us through how this generation gap is playing out in the corporate world? Because you have that almost 2 decades of experience interacting, networking, and what are some of those those challenges that the leaders of today probably are facing with induction of the next generation workforce into these organizations?
So, my view is I think we are at a very interesting point of our corporate environment or in terms of even entrepreneurial ecosystem, because we are starting to see what we call as the millennial kids born after 2000 already starting to enter into the workforce or starting with their own entrepreneurs now that they're 2021 plus, right? So you will start to see this a lot more when they actually become a sizable percentage in the workforce. Today, if I look at back my experience of 2 decades, I've seen particularly in the last 5-6 years when you had the great resignation period post COVID, etc. A lot of that was driven from the 90s born individuals or probably slightly into the mid 80s, right? So a lot of that talent shift happened or search for new opportunities happened from people at 30, 35 less, right? Now, why did that happen? They happened because they kind of started to see more opportunities. They started to see that urge of doing different things, etc., and grab it when it comes to. So yes, loyalty took a little bit of backseat when compared to what was on the table as a next big opportunity. With the current generation, which is kind of the millennial kids entering the workforce, that's the generation that has actually been born, brought up with all of the gadgets and all of the social media already there, right? The instant gratification from instant messaging apps or the 10 minutes delivery or, super fast kind of responses. Now, when they come into the workforce, they are going to really kind of make a huge impact because many of our organizations and probably the multinational organizations are slightly ahead of the curve because of the fact that they are aware of what's happening, etc. But a lot of organizations even today run traditionally with the family kind of construct or operating value system. Now, that's where I think I will start to see a bit of a clash between what the ideas that will come from the new generation and the fact that they would want a quick action, not necessarily go through a step 1, 2, 3, 4 bureaucratic process of having a meeting, sending the agenda, taking a decision, then following it up with an email, etc. They would want, let's get onto a call, take a decision, move on, right? So because their ability to take risk and fail fast is much higher, they would expect the same thing. And that's where I see a challenge that corporates and particularly the leadership may need to evolve to be able to handle with that.
Agree, completely agree with you. In fact, continuing this point, right, Chetan, as a coach, what would your advice be? Because, you have seen this probably in your own organization, and a lot of our audiences, right, who are in the kind of the mid-management layer are coming across, because at the same time, they imagine they are also heading into their mid-40s or maybe the late 30s or even 50s, and they have to adjust, right, to the kind of mindset of this new generation who are adaptive thing. They are quick, they are technologically smart, they come up with amazing ideas. I think they actually would be in a better position to run these organizations, right? Because even look at it, the senior management, right? Some youngster, 22-year-old, 25-year-old coming and giving super ideas, a better way to work around. Probably the senior management will say, hey, this guy seems to be smartly prepared than you, what you did for last 5-10 years. So my question to you, it's a long question, but my question to you is, how does the mid-management actually evolve? They have to evolve to make themselves actually better prepared with challenges ahead.
So, okay, let me start with the personal situation, right? So I've got two twin boys, right? And I can clearly see the challenges of managing 2 teenagers. And now imagine you have 200 of them and you are a division head or you are a senior director trying to navigate that kind of a population. I think that's going to be a very, very interesting. I'm not going to scare it. I'm not going to try and make it, it's going to be a difficult one. But yes, it's definitely going to be a very interesting one, provided we kind of prepare ourselves to handle that situation, right? Now, before I answer that question, I see a couple of other pressures also, which is going to make it really difficult for the mid-management, particularly from the fact that with the advancement in the technology, especially the generative AI and all of the process lean focus, etc., the processes are changing and therefore the work is changing. There are a lot of surveys and studies that say that whatever we do, a lot of it probably won't exist in the next 3-5 years time, right? So the question is, the middle management is still already struggling with those challenges which are already in flight. Coupled with that, what we have seen, COVID and then post-COVID, all the geopolitical tensions, the economic meltdown, etc., the challenges that lie ahead in front of us, there will always be that external pressure from market. So you're going to have cost pressures, you're going to have revenue challenges, etc. So that's also going to play out. So you've almost got a pull and a push factor, and this middle management kind of getting squeezed in between. Now, when I say middle management, it pretty much goes all the way up to senior as well, because a lot of us would also have pressure from the board and from the shareholders, right? So that middle range is quite big depending on which organization I'm talking about. Now, if you are a middle manager and you want to kind of prepare, at least from the perspective of the influx of the millennial population into the workforce, in my view, as a post, there are a couple of things I would probably want to suggest. The first I would say is, do not fight the change, because whether you accept, you don't accept, you prepare yourself, the change is going to happen. So if you're able to embrace that change proactively, likely that you will be more successful in handling it rather than trying to be the last one who actually is forced to embrace the change, right? The second point I'll probably say is that the leadership style has to evolve. The leadership style has to move from being more of, approach driven to a outcome driven. What I mean by that is, maybe when we started our careers 20 years ago, there were set process documents, there were set processes that said you need to do 1, 2, 3, 4 to get to this outcome. When technology changes, when process changes, and then you have the new thought process coming into the organization, the status quo is going to get challenged, right? So rather than fighting that, why not get to a middle ground to say, as long as the outcome is same and it's within the acceptable risk tolerance of the organization, then those minor tweaks should be left to the individuals who are actually running the process. That way you give them a safe space for them to experiment and figure out which is the right way to do it, which will give a win-win outcome, because those individuals will feel valued, they feel they'll be able to contribute into it, and the organization also benefits from a more faster, crisper process, as well as a fresh ideology as well. So I think that's a second point. The third point, which is kind of an extension of the second point, is around how we look at leadership, right? Maybe when we started our career, we would never question why a manager wants something from us. We would have probably just done it because he or she sat above us from a corporate hierarchy perspective. Yeah. Now, those corporate hierarchies exist on paper, but do they really work effectively on the ground is a question we need to ask ourselves. In today's time, I think it's the leadership by influence that works. So the way today one television channel competes with 200 others to get the attention of the viewers, us as a manager or a leader will also have to compete with everything else around to demonstrate to that employee of ours who might be the junior most in the ranks to say why it makes sense for you to listen to me. So I think that mindset shift has to happen to accept that, yes, we also will have to do that extra bit for them to see the value in them listening to us and then following through. Else, we will have to be more open about embracing their ideas and eventually changing our ideology, right? So operating by power or the power of the chair, I don't think it's going to work. It's all about influence and how you take it from there. The fourth point I would probably say is that we need to also kind of build genuine connects, right? Because it's no longer where you can actually make a statement and accept that people will buy into it simply because it's coming from a power of position. If you need to be a leader, you need to be consistent and authentic. The teams and the younger audience will actually value you if they see a consistent thought process, not just in a town hall session, but also in terms of how you deal with success, how you deal with the delays and deadlines getting missed, and day-to-day interactions. And if they see a consistent pattern, if they see an authenticity, they're going to actually like you.
So basically what you're saying is the leadership needs to walk the talk in reality.
Absolutely, more than ever. It was always there, but more than ever, the leadership needs to walk the talk, because that's the only way you actually get the attention of the audience that you're trying to influence. And finally, I would probably say is that we need to be able to accept the fact that, as you rightly said, the brightest idea could come from the youngest member of the team. And you, somebody who's probably been in that role, in that seat for years, has to open up to the idea that, yes, there could be more smart ideas in the room. And if that is genuinely the belief of everybody in the team, then that should be embraced, right? People would have a faster career progressions than what some of us who have joined the corporate world 20 years ago will have. And I think that's the reality.
Absolutely. In fact, Chetan, and especially looking at India, because I know our audiences are across the world, but let's be specific to India, where our strong point for India is the demographic dividend, and that's where this age group comes in, right? And where workforce, the 40 plus, 50 plus, even 35 plus crowd, or the management, the middle management, will have to kind of be ready for this kind of paradigm shift. Earlier, probably the paradigm shift was maybe in technology, but now this technology always will be there. But now this will be coupled with the mindset of the young folks, and we got to accept that in the first place, right? I think that's what we're looking forward to in working, collaboratively and working as teams, and not as that boss and subordinate kind of mindset will have to really change. Do you see that as a big change?
Very true.
Yeah. I just wanted to know, just to sorry, carry on. Yeah.
So I'm saying a lot of organizations are already embracing that. But when you just look at the landscape of our country and even across the world, because this cycle plays out in its own different timelines, you will still see organizations that have yet to embrace and make that shift. Some are already making an attempt, but there are a lot more that needs to happen to prepare ourselves for the tsunami that is waiting, which is effectively the entire shift of workforce to a more younger, dynamic, more technology savvy population.
Yeah. I mean, thanks for these useful coaching tips and these suggestions, Chetan, which you actually, as we are navigating that tsunami, probably that is building up on the horizon. Now let's shift focus to a very slightly different perspective, Chetan. In your book, right, which is Accelerating Your Career, you made a reference of having pacers to help you actually navigate that career run. Can you actually talk through a bit on that?
Thanks, Santosh. From my perspective, I was told the mantra very early at my stage of my corporate career by my manager that life is not a 100-meter sprint, it's a marathon. And the same holds true for corporate career or an entrepreneurial journey as well. It's not that you give 100% to it in the next 30 seconds or 100 seconds, kind of a 100-meter sprint, and you get to the finishing line. It's much longer. If you're running a marathon, and for all of those who probably attempted a marathon, whether it's a 10K, half marathon, or a full marathon, would know that you need to ensure that you have the stamina and the willingness to run all the way till the finishing line. Because if you push too hard in the initial phase, likely that you might actually burn out by the time you move to the halfway mark. Same thing applies in our career as well, right? You need to know that it's a 20 years, so a few setbacks, a few delays is not really going to change it. That's first point. The second point is that when I run a marathon, right, I may have people who may be running faster than me. I may have people who may be running slower than me, but I'm running my own track because my objective is to complete my full marathon of 42 kilometers. So effectively, I may end up kind of telling myself that I'm running my own track. I should not get distracted with what's happening around us, right? So that's the point. Now, if you see a marathon, there are pacers. Now, pacers are actually professional runners who actually run to a particular timeline, and their job is actually to ensure that they take the groups of people with them. So if I associate myself to a pacer who completes a full marathon in say, for example, hypothetically 5 hours, then I will tag myself to that pacer and I'll keep an eye on that. All I have to do is keep that person in my eyesight, and the rest will be taken care of the pacer because he keeps pushing further and further and further, and I just keep that person in my eyesight. If I feel a little this thing behind, the pacer will actually come and pull me up and say, let's do it. And I've had that experience where I was almost wanting to give up and I was running my full marathon, and the pacer who was kind of with me, he said, no, Chetan, you've done it so far, you can do it more. And 2-3 of those conversations while running kept me going all the way to the finishing line, right? Same way, you need to have pacers in your career. People who are not competing with you, but people who are actually genuinely wanting to be with you just to
pulling you along
and encourage you. Now, it could be even your junior. It doesn't always have to be a manager. Even your junior could come up and say something very positive, saying, I'm inspired by what you do and your ideas are great. That's a good enough pep talk for a manager to feel valued and push further. But that can only happen when you're authentic, when you're open to a conversation with a junior or a peer, etc. So the whole concept about having paces in career comes from this marathon experience of mine. And I use that analogy to say, having a group of people around you to keep you chugging along the way always helps.
Okay. Actually staying on this topic, Chetan, of young adults and then evolving ecosystem, while we have heard, as a corporate leader and, as a coach and a mentor, can you actually share a few of your personal experiences and any learnings as a father of twins, and how are you helping them to be ready for the future?
So I just mentioned that I have twin boys and they are 13, right? So they're right at that age where they are going to be start testing my patience and all of that what a father has to go as a father of a teenager. So I think that journey for me has just begun. Uh, for me, if I particularly focus about how do I prepare them for the future, so see, both me and my wife have been blessed with fairly good academic records, right? And we're very proud about where we've been and achieved. Uh, and I am equally very keen, and so is my wife, that we actually ensure that they have good academic records as well. Now, I'm not saying they have to be topper in the class, but they just have to be enough to actually get through with some decent, outcomes in as far as the academic journey is concerned. But going back to that earlier analogy of roti kapda makan, the question is, if they have been raised with that security already, then unlikely that they will have the same hunger as I had when I had ambitions to have a successful corporate career, create a certain wealth, or live a certain type of lifestyle, right? So a lot of the current generation are going back into minimalistic. They are trying to chase passions around environment and animal care, etc., because that's what is giving them pleasure and passion. So for me, trying to look for what gives my boys passion is where my focus is. My boys are both active into sports. One is into cricket and the other one is into football. So I'm actually encouraging them to actually look at that as a career. Now, obviously, it's a little too early. They're 13. By the time they enter into any kind of working age population, that's another 8 to 10 years to go. But my view is to actually get them to say, if you want to be in sports and that's your passion, aim to be a sportsman. If you get there, excellent. If not, then the sports ecosystem is also growing. So you could still be in a job that is connected to the sports. It could be in sports management, it could be sports physiotherapy, it could be related to sports news anchoring, anything that keeps you in and around with a passion. Because otherwise, if you force yourself into doing something that you're not, then I have personally seen where people who have done MBA come into a corporate world for 2 years and then they kind of sit in a meeting and say, I'm not sure if this is what I wanted to do. And they're right in their perspective. Probably they didn't really think through to it. So as a father, what I'm getting them to do is to think through on what they would want to do and try it out. It's okay if it doesn't work out, right? So that's the part what I'm working on. If you ask me, if not academics or along with academics, what else? I would probably say 2 skills that I personally believe, not as a coach, but also as a father, that is going to be absolutely non-negotiable for raising today's kids. The first is about, personal resiliency. And the second is about the learning agility. Now, why do I say personal resiliency? Is because, see, when the kid is being brought up in a very safe, secured environment where they have only seen stability, what they have not seen is the downside. So when they encounter a first no, right? Or they encounter a first failure or a first low scores, etc., they just don't know how to handle. So while raising them with all the safety net, I also want to prepare them to be able to handle the downside, right? Now, that in my view, and after a lot of research, I've come up with my own model, and I'm happy to share with your audience, Santosh here, is the model of COKA, C-O-C-A, where I look at C for confidence, O for optimism, and C-A for change agility. Now, confidence comes at the very base of the pyramid of the COKA model that I've developed. The reason which I say that because it's confidence is the first step you take. If you feel that you can jump off a parachute, you need to at least tell yourself that, yes, I think I have the confidence to even try it out, right? So that's the first step. If you say I have no confidence, you'll never be able to even go up to your terrace of the building, leave aside jumping from a parachute. So that's the first part. Then comes the optimism, because once you say that, yes, you want to experience this, right, and have the confidence to go for it, then comes the optimism to say, I will work towards an outcome where I end up opening my parachute when I'm jumping up from the flight, and that will be my best scenario, and I focus my energy on actually creating that best scenario. So optimism is about trying to convert the confidence into an outcome which is the most favorable outcome, right? And then once you've achieved that favorable outcome, then comes adapting to that change, because when you go through an experience and end up successfully, it's going to change. It's going to change a lot of things for you. If you're into a new job, a new career, a new sports, a new hobby, once you embrace that, the world around you changes. So your mindset has to evolve and accept those changes. So that's where the change agility comes in. So the COC or the COKA model helps build personal resilience. And that's what I'm kind of working with my kids so that they get raised in a very safe, secure environment. They have all the luxuries they need. They have all the gadgets. I can't keep them away from it. But I make them responsible by training them on personal resilience. The second part is around the learning agility. Now, this to me is very important to be inculcated into the kids at a very young age. People like you and I also have to go through it because of all the changes that are happening. But at a younger age, it's easy to adapt. Now, why that is important is because I may be training him or her for what is there today. But if they're going to enter the workspace only after 10 years, a lot is going to change. And honestly, I don't even know what is going to be there 10 years from now. And their journey starts from there. It doesn't end there. They start from there. So if you're at 20 and you've got a career going all the way up to 60, 65, 70, how do you train yourself to remain at the top of your field all throughout? And that can only come, one, with being continuously aware of what's changing around you, whether it's new technologies, new ways of doing things, new mindsets, etc. Be aware of it. And secondly, learn that quickly and bring it to life quickly. So the learning agility is basically being aware of what's changing around you, embracing it, learning very quickly, getting yourself trained up very quickly, and then putting it to use immediately, and then start the cycle all over again to be on the watch out of what's next. Absolutely. So as a father, this is what I'm kind of focusing with my kids.
In fact, Chetan, I was just thinking when you were, especially the later part of this podcast, right? It's amazing, right? You have this 2 decades of corporate experience, worked in Mumbai, Singapore, then Chennai, right? Then you have this stakeholder management with working with multinationals, and of course, working with local managements, I'm very sure. Then as a father of 2, the challenges that are already there and upcoming, right? And at the same time, if you look at the world as a whole, the change of technology, the kind of work culture that we are seeing, because you've seen that before the last 20 years, and you kind of understand where the younger generation is getting into. And you are kind of, if I have to use the right word, cautioning our audiences who are probably in a similar kind of age group as ours, and, getting ready for not just their own kids, but even their own style of management, right? So you kind of, it's like, I will put it this way, your life or your career stage today is like a microcosm of the whole issue at the point in time that we are discussing. So it was absolutely great to have you on this podcast, which is titled Navigating Life with Human Compass. And I know the human compass here is that today we talk of AI, we talk of technology, we talk of all the gadget life that we have, right? Our life starts with a gadget and ends with a gadget, but there is that human touch which probably is missing, and which is what you want to bring back, through your startup. So, Chetan, any closing words before we kickstart our episodes and our own journey of this podcast? Navigating life with a human compass. Any closing words?
Thank you, Santosh, for inviting me. I think it was great connecting with you. For me, I would say as closing comments, we can't fight these changes. We can't fight, and we shouldn't fight technology as well. Technology is not bad per se. The question is, do we get technology to work for us, or do we end up becoming slaves of technology? I think that's the key point here. And in between, the whole purpose of bringing the human connect is because effectively, however more the artificial intelligence evolves, I think the human intelligence will always have an edge. The problem is we've forgotten to activate the human intelligence. We've survived so many years, thousands of years to get to where we are today, and we will continue to survive. The question is, are we surviving along with thriving, or are we just kind of chugging along? And that's where this whole need to have this human-to-human connection and that little bit of effort from my side to bring to life what I have learned. Hopefully people benefit from it. But thank you, Santosh, again for inviting me, and wish you all the best for your new series of podcast.
And well, with that, we come to the end of this first inaugural launch episode of this podcast, Navigating Life with the Human Compass. I'm sure you're going to be with us across all these episodes as we talk about, life-changing events, how to adjust to them, how to adjust to family situations and our corporate life. Lots of aspects of the human first, the human being, right, which we're trying to bring to a podcast. Thank you for staying on through this episode with me, Santosh Sirur. From me, Santosh, and my guest today, Chetan Bulsari. Thank you once again for joining on this podcast. Bye-bye and take care.
Thank you.